This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys Network. Here's your host, Will Hill.
Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys. Coming up on the show, Gill Alexander of a numbers game will join us. We will go over the weekend in the NFL. A lot to discuss: college football, playoff implications. I actually, during the NFL slate, I was driving home. I was not driving. I was coming home from Cooperstown. I was in the passenger seat watching football on YouTube. My wife was driving, but spent the weekend in Cooperstown. I will discuss that here shortly, but I was able to stay on top of these games. It's not as easy watching on your phone because I don't think on a phone you have the multi-view, so I had to toggle between game to game. And I got home for the 4 o'clock games. The 4 o'clock games were absolutely unwatchable. Jets are a complete nightmare. Cowboys are awful. We know the Titans are bad. The 4 o'clock slate was as bad a window of football as I can remember in a long time. But the story, at least in the 1 o'clock window, to me, and I wasn't expecting to start the show with the Bears, but to me, this is really the theme, as they were blown out at home to a bad Patriot team. May looked better than May looked better than Caleb Williams. And if you're the Bears, boy, this is the second year in a row you've had the first pick in the draft, and they got a pass last year because they got so much for the young trade. People, oh, great trade. You got a ton of assets, which you did, but still, last year you could have had Stroud. This year you could have had Jaden Daniels, and you might still need a quarterback. Now, I know the coaching staff isn't good. They probably should have. And if you watch Hard Knocks, boy, that coaching staff was not impressive with Eberflus. And he just came off as boring and just not a lot of intensity. And maybe this is all on the coaching staff, but this looks, for the second year in a row, like Stroud and, Jaden Daniels, you passed on two elite young quarterbacks, and you still don't know what you have at quarterback. So this is a brewing, budding disaster for the Bears, as they were just embarrassed at home, 19-3. To me, they are done. They're not making the playoffs. Their schedule is brutal coming up. They still have to play Green Bay twice. They still get Detroit twice. They got to play Minnesota. They got to play all their division games. Minnesota, Detroit, Green Bay combined 6 times. They got San Francisco. They got a brutal schedule. They might not win a game for a very long time because it is going to be tough sledding for the Bears. Their schedule is very front-loaded in terms of the easy games. Now they have all their tough games, and they look absolutely awful. And it just looks like that was too early to say it's a wasted pick, but it's not too early to say, hey, there's a very good chance they once again passed on the wrong guy. And I don't care how much draft assets you got for Stroud. You'd rather have Stroud, because who knows with draft picks, and none of those draft picks are a really good quarterback. And Daniels looks like the real deal for Washington. So a nightmare for Chicago. And to me, another theme here, and there was a lot of bad football, trying to pick who the worst team is. And if you look in a couple of weeks down the road to the Thanksgiving games, and the Giants right now are in line for the first pick in the draft. The Giants play the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, two awful teams. The Bears, who I just mentioned, they play on Thanksgiving in Detroit. Boy, there are some awful, awful teams. Dallas, when are they winning another game? Maybe they beat the Giants. But to me, the race to the bottom is so fascinating because the Panthers are still bad, even though they're at 3 wins now. The Patriots are really bad. So the teams we all thought were the worst teams, Patriots and Panthers, both now have 3 wins. The Giants are at 2. The Titans are really bad. I mean, you just go down the line. There's a good 6, 8 teams that are just absolutely unwatchable. I don't know the reason for it. I don't know if this is recency bias. I remember last year, a big theme was, man, there's a lot of bad quarterbacks, but I can't remember a year, at least off the top of my head, where there was just so many teams that were Jacksonville's unwatchable. They somehow covered that game against Minnesota. Minnesota basically tripled them in yardage. Vikings scored no touchdowns, had 3 turnovers, and still won the game. Jags couldn't move the ball. Vikings, basically, at one point, the Vikings had run like 38 plays in Jacksonville territory and only had 3 points. Minnesota must have run 50-plus plays from Jacksonville territory. It didn't score a touchdown. Darnold was awful, kept throwing interceptions, but the defense held up, and Jacksonville couldn't do anything on offense. But again, Jacksonville right now is an awful team. With or without Lawrence, they're a bad team. I mean, you just go down the line here. There's Chargers beat the Titans. The Titans are awful. Cowboys is currently constructed are awful. The Jets are not a good team. I mean, there's just a handful. Panthers and Giants this morning was a rough one. Man, there's just some really bad team. The Saints won today, but it's not like they're a lot of fun to watch. So just a year where there is just a handful of really, really lousy teams. And again, a thing that interests me is the AFC playoff picture, because I think we now, and we talked about this last week, I think we know now for sure of the 6 of the 7 teams, because the Chargers win again, the Steelers win again, a good win in Washington, come from behind. Really interesting ending where they draw an offsides. There was a controversial spot with Washington having the ball, but Chargers now, Steelers now, both really firmly in the playoffs. And Bills are playing right now, up 10-0 on the line. So we'll see how that wraps up. But Texans are going to make it. Chiefs, Ravens. So Chiefs, Chargers, Ravens, Steelers, Texans, Bills are 6 of your 7. The spot for the 7, that 7 spot is wide open, and that 7 spot might go to a team that's under 500 because Bengals lost Thursday. Jets lose today. The Broncos lose a horrible game where they had a chip shot field goal to win it to beat Kansas City. We're way up. Kansas City comes from behind, and the field goal gets blocked. And our old buddy, if you remember from anyone that followed me on our old podcast, Mike Westhoff, the special teams coach for the Broncos, used to be the special team coach for the Jets. He was on my old podcast. Was a great spot. Was interesting. Said a lot of things. Was retired at the time. Went back into coaching. He coaches the special teams for the Broncos. I'm sure he is absolutely just ticked off beyond belief that he let his kick get blocked there, a lot of penetration, but Denver blows the game. So Denver, Cincy, the Colts, the Jets, all these teams that are in the mix for the final spot all lose. And with the Steelers and Chargers winning, they firm up their spot. So I don't know if you're Miami, and Miami is in action Monday night against the Rams. The line is Rams -2. If you're Miami, can you talk yourself into, hey, we win Monday night, we get on a roll here and we find our way to 8 and we somehow get in with tiebreakers? I would say no, but and I guess I would lean towards Denver being the best of these teams. But the bottom line is that 7 spot is wide open. It might go to a team that is under 500, which is unusual for a team under 500 to get a wild card. Once in a while, we'll see, like Washington a few years ago won the division with under 500 record. There was a year Seattle won the division with an under 500 record and actually won a game. That was the year Lynch had the great run against the Saints, and they upset New Orleans. But very rarely do you get a wild card that is under 500. But hey, with the 7th spot, with the extra spot added a few years ago, 2020, it's going to happen occasionally here where you get an 8 and 9 team sneak into the playoffs. And I think that's very, very possible, if not likely here for the AFC. I don't have a great feel for this Monday night game. I think if you can tease ahead and the teaser legs, the obvious teaser legs, the 7s, the 3s, when you can go through the 3 and the 7 either way, called the Wong teasers, as most of you guys know. So teasing, 7.5 point favorite down to 1.5, or teasing a 1.5 point underdog up to 7.5. All of those legs did very, very well today. If you can tease ahead towards next week, teasing Miami up to 8 with some of the stuff next week, and there are a lot of legs next week. Bills, Chiefs, Chargers, Bengals is a 2.5 line. Denver, Atlanta is a 1.5 line. I think Miami is a great teaser leg. And again, you have a ton of options to tease it with. So I don't have a great feel, but hey, if you like Miami and these lines are not up right now, if you do like Miami, taking them at a long price to make the playoffs is probably not the worst idea because again, it is wide open for this final spot. So would say a great day of football. The 1:00 slate was pretty good. San Francisco pulls out a game after missing a bunch of kicks. You're starting to feel like, man, if they blow this game, maybe it's just not their year. And Arizona does win again. So maybe Arizona, there is some life, some teeth to that Gannon coach of the year, as I've talked about for the last couple of weeks here. But San Francisco does win. That would have been a big break for Arizona to gain another game on them. Philly buries Dallas. That sets up an interesting Thursday night game with Philly and Washington, where Philly has now gained a game on Washington. Philly's a good team. I've talked about this the last couple of weeks. Early in the year, hey, the defense, the coaching, there was a lot of things where you just kind of shake your head and think maybe last year's performance, the bad ending to the season carried over to this year. Not the case, because they're a very good offensive football team with A.J. Brown and Barkley and Devontae Smith and a pretty good quarterback in Hurts. Shaky start to the game, but they just buried Dallas today. I actually think they're the better team than Washington. So another good Thursday night game coming up. We'll spend more time on that on the Wednesday show. But just yeah, I think Philly has a leg up here on Washington. And if they can ever win on Thursday night, they're in good shape to win a division. And Philly is live here to be playing deep into the playoffs. I know nobody likes the coach, but they are a talented team. Defense has played better. So those are some of the big takeaways from the day in the NFL. We'll get to Gill. And I was teasing Gill because for people that don't know, Gill is a big Giants fan, a big Bonds guy, San Francisco Giants. And I was teasing him when at the Hall of Fame. I'm like, I don't see the Barry Bonds wing of the Hall of Fame. And he was texting me back. I'm on a group chat with him and Bear. And he's like, just flipping out like it's how ridiculous it is that Bonds isn't in. And I'm sure when I ask him about it, he'll get riled up. Bear replied, hey, I'm never going to the Hall of Fame till Pete Rose is in. If you're a baseball fan, if you like history, if you like baseball even a little bit, boy, the Baseball Hall of Fame, first time going, it is a must go to. There's just so much history. And I'm not like a huge memorabilia autographs guy, but when you're standing in front of the uniform Babe Ruth wore, or I saw the MVP award that Hank Aaron won in 1957 right there with his World Series ring from that year and his gold glove. I guess Hank Aaron donated it. They have the cleats that Kurt Schilling wore in 2004 with the bloody. I mean, just to have these things in front of you. Again, if you like baseball, it's just hard not to appreciate it. It's a cool town. There's so much history in the museum, and I know Bond should be in, Clemens should be in, Pete Rose should be in, A-Rod. All these guys should be in. I understand that it's not perfect, but when you have all that history in front of you, man, it's hard not to appreciate. I saw they have they have, I don't know, it was like a slideshow with some of the best baseball quotes of all time, and there's one from Rod Carew that I had not heard before. And he said his favorite song is the national anthem because every time he hears the national anthem, he knows he's about to get 2 or 3 hits. I mean, just cool stuff like that where, man, you just realize how long this game's been played and all the great players and all the great moments. And it just does such a great job of, capturing it and make you appreciate, the history, the tradition. So highly recommend it. Really a lot of fun. Really, great to, great for anyone that would be interested and hasn't gone or is on the fence about going. Cannot recommend it enough. So we'll discuss that. We'll discuss college. NFL was a big college weekend. Georgia loses, Miami loses. Maybe spend some more time on that Wednesday, but I'll see what Gill thinks about all of that with the committee, what they'll do, his takeaways from the NFL. All of that is next. This Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More podcast. You can catch him on a numbers game, the Beating the Book Megapod. It is the great Gill Alexander. Gilly, what's up, man? How was your Sunday? How's everything?
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me. It turned out pretty well. It was a pretty good Sunday. It wasn't great, because like an idiot, I had the Titans in millions, so that didn't work out. And I also went down with the Skins, which could have gone either way, obviously. But Jacksonville somehow got home, so I consider myself fortunate. I have nothing to complain about there. And Arizona was the easy peasy play of the day.
What's your big takeaway from the day, just in general?
That it's really bad football by and large. I mean, I hate to say it, but like you think about there's a lot of teams that are so bad this year. Yeah. So bad. Those three, like the afternoon window was just atrocious with the Jets and the Cowboys. The Cowboys can't look any worse. I know Dak didn't play, but like I didn't think Cooper Rush was that big of a drop off. But the Cowboys are a disaster. What was the third? The Jets, the Cowboys, and the Titans, of course. So that was terrible. And then there's a bunch of them in the morning time. I think the biggest positive takeaway is Arizona might be really, really good. They might be better than any of us thought they were.
Yeah, might be like an 11-win team. And again, like there's going to be a lot of competition for coach of the year because Andy Reid's team still hasn't lost a game. Maybe he gets like a lifetime achievement award. Tomlin is pulling his usual magic acts. You got O'Connell in the mix. Maybe they need to win the division. Dan Campbell hasn't lost many games. We're recording this right as Sunday night's about to kick off. So it's not like some foregone conclusion that if Gannon wins 10, 11 games and wins the division, and you almost got a break with San Francisco almost losing, which would have helped them win the division. But Gannon, to me, he's going to be on the short list and be curious to see when these numbers reopen, what he's at. But I've been bounding the table for this one. I think Gannon, has a good shot here to be in the mix.
I think that's probably true. And I think, thinking further about your initial question, which is, what else was the big takeaway? You had Atlanta probably lost the game because they missed 3 field goals. The Niners barely won a game because they missed 3 field goals. The Vikings barely won a game they should have destroyed in, right? Where they like gained 250 yards. Don't hold me to that number. Something like that, more than Jacksonville did. So there was a lot of weird box score stuff like that today, and so, the conclusion is always very, very sort of muddled after that. It's like, okay, well, are the Niners better than that? Are the Falcons better than that? Or are they just kind of that where it's just, I don't mean, obviously I don't expect them to miss 3 field goals a game, but that it's just not their years, like the Niners, you wonder, by the way, Purdy, I don't know if people noticed with him today, like that's going to go unnoticed, how unbelievable he was at times today. And he might've single-handedly won him that game late. So, I just think there's a lot of confusion with a lot of these results. And then the game that was supposed to be the best on paper, Pittsburgh, Washington, ended up being that, I think. And it could have gone either way. It was a total coin flip in the end. Total Plinko.
You mentioned there's a lot of bad teams. Who's the worst team? Who ultimately gets the first pick in the draft as I'm searching for these markets?
who is the worst team and who ultimately gets the first pick in the draft.
Yeah.
Those could be two different teams because I don't have the schedules in front of me.
Yeah.
But I think that the worst team, dude,
It's tough. It's not easy.
could it be Dallas? Like,
Oh man,
as currently constituted,
they're really
could it be
bad.
Dallas?
I mean, they do have
Because
Parsons back and Lamb, but it's not. I mean, that's not a lot.
Because if you go through the others, right, the Giants sucked today, but at times have life, right? They're not
Sure.
a totally sucky football team. Carolina's managed to win 3 games somehow. I
Yeah.
don't know that they're the worst. They're feisty at least. Tennessee always puts up good numbers, it seems like, even though they might not have today. I'm just trying to think of some. The Raiders are pretty bad too.
New England's bad, but they won again and almost won last week. They're up to what, 3 wins now, which some of us have under 4.5 wins. It's hard for them to win games, but hey, you got half the season left. You only need 2 more. It's not a great team.
Maybe the most interesting answer to that question is the most dysfunctional team, and maybe the worst right now is a team that's already won 4 games, which is the Bears. So throw them in there, and I think people are starting to realize, Caleb, oh boy.
That's what I talked about on my open. That was one of the big things of the day, because not only, you could basically cross them off with their record, with their schedule, and the AFC is a different story. And I'm curious your thoughts on the AFC. The Bears are not making the playoffs, and this is the second year in a row they've had the first pick, and the second year in a row it looks like a really good quarterback went to a different team. Now they got a pass because they got so much for the young pick to Carolina that, great trade. You got all these picks. Yeah, picks are great. You'd probably rather have CJ Stroud, even though he hasn't been great this year. And you'd definitely rather have Daniels than Caleb Williams. I know we're only halfway into the rookie year, but this is 2 years in a row. It was right on a platter for you. And you just, you didn't get it right, it doesn't seem.
Stroud and Daniels are conservatively 2 of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yes.
Right? And so it's not even a debate. Like, though, you just complete malpractice one year after another. And we are not armchair quarterbacking this, right? I had multiple plus money bets on Stroud to go number 1 because I was like, of course they're trading up.
Congrats on those, by the way. Those should cash any day.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just point me to where I can go to cash that, because I've been having some trouble with that. And then Jayden Daniels, with the Skins sitting at 2, and I'm a lifelong Skins fan, that's the guy I wanted so badly because, and Wishnev was just saying this on our text, we tend to watch so much football.
Yep.
Right? And he maybe more than all of us, Wishnev. And if you watch college football all day on Saturdays like we do, it was kind of apparent in the end that Stroud and Daniels were the best of their classes, with apologies to Caleb Williams, who obviously was going to get the Heisman his junior year, right? You weren't going to take that away from him. But he wasn't really that awesome last year, And Wishnev's explanation is a great one, which is, imagine a guy who's got 5-star wide receivers just scrambles around and spins around for 10 seconds, and imagine his 5-star receivers eventually get open, So, but they seem to have a bit of a mutiny over there. So they're not going to end up with the worst record. They're not going to end up with the first pick, but it's going to be damn close in the end because, as you suggested, there are not many wins, if any, left on that schedule. Like, they may win 1 or 2 more games tops the rest of the way.
Yeah, and FanDuel is good about posting the market, who will have the first pick in the draft or who will have fewest wins, however you want to word it. It's not up right now, but that's an interesting one where a lot of teams are sort of live. Like, Dallas is quietly live. The Giants, I think, are in line to get it as of now.
And everybody's won twice, right? Nobody's won fewer than that. So
yes,
it's not like there's a team that's so bottomed out.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And what else is interesting to me, and maybe I'm more interested in this than I should be, the 7th spot for the AFC, because the Bengals lose, the Jets lose, the Colts lose, the Broncos lose in horrific fashion. Chargers win, Steelers win. I think we know 6 of the 7 teams: Chargers, Steelers, Texans, Bills, Chiefs, Ravens. Who the hell is going to be that 7th spot? And it leads into the Monday night game, Miami, LA. I don't know if you have a pick on this. I was thinking Miami's probably better than a lot of these teams. They just might have dug themselves too deep a hole to dig out of. I don't know who gets that 7th spot though.
I do not have a pick in that game. You are correct. I think I am forced to acknowledge that the Chargers are 6th, the 6th team, wherever they end up seated. Yeah. I wasn't willing to do that until now, but their schedule is really easy.
You might only need 8 to get in. You really might. The 7th seed might be an 8 and 9 team.
I as much as I hate to say it, because it really makes me look bad from what I was saying about the Broncos before the season, because I never thought Bo Nix was a pro quarterback.
Yeah.
They're probably the best of the rest.
Not bad.
I mean, by the way, also about that game, like the Chiefs, how many ways can they figure out, to win a football game? It's just like they've exhausted every possible avenue. It's incredible.
I don't like it for them going forward. If I'm a Chiefs fan, it reminds me of the Viking season 2 years ago. They're much better than the Vikings were, but I want the ball to bounce the other way. So I don't want these to. I feel like the game, and this is a weird way to look at it. I don't want the playoffs to come around where I've won 6 out of 6 coin flip games. I want a couple of these to go against me. Then in the playoffs, I want to be owed one. You know what I mean? I don't want. I feel like I'm living on borrowed time, or just I got lucky this week. I got lucky last week. I keep getting lucky. You almost feel like they're going to run out of luck at some point.
You absolutely feel that way. The problem is that if you go back to, was it the Thanksgiving game? No, it wasn't Thanksgiving. Was it
Christmas against the Raiders when they lost?
Christmas, the Christmas game.
Haven't lost since.
Chiefs Raiders, right? They could not have looked worse, right? So there's no comparison to a 9-0 team that keeps figuring out a way to win, as much as like if I'm doing my power rankings, right? I've just had the Chiefs as de facto number 1 because they have Mahomes. There's no real way they're the number 1 power rank team, right? We all agree on that. They can't be anymore. Yet, I mean, we've already seen them look. Last year on that Christmas game, if you had whispered, if someone had come to you and said, hey, this team that looks like crap, they're actually going to win the Super Bowl anyway. So there's no bottom. There's no, it doesn't matter how bad they look. They're still going to have Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, assuming he doesn't get hurt. And it's still going to be that to hack the entire sport of football. So
yeah, and as bad as they looked at Christmas, you could have at least, I wouldn't have died of shock just because, hey, you got a good defense, you got Mahomes, you can always see a path. But for someone to tell you that day, December 25th last year, with how bad they looked, hey, you'll be maybe at next Thanksgiving and they won't have lost the game that you've been. Wait, that seems a little far fetched. It really is crazy. Any other big takeaways from NFL? Because I'm curious your thoughts on college here.
I think Washington is exactly who I thought they were, which is again, I've said it for a few weeks now. They're probably the 8th or so best team in the league, which is they're better than most, but they lost to the Ravens by a touchdown. They could have very easily beaten the Steelers today, but they didn't. They were up 10, and they're right around there, right? I think they're a team that will get into the playoffs either by division or by wild card, and they might even win a game, but that's kind of, I don't feel like they're as good as the best, right? They're the next group of teams. And I don't think, like, if they played a Detroit or, pick your behemoth or a Baltimore, obviously that would be a Super Bowl, but I'm just saying that top echelon, they're not beating that team this year.
It feels like their ceiling, and look, anything can happen. It feels like their ceiling is they get in and they won a game and then they lost to like a Detroit or somebody really good in the second round, which would be a grand slam home run of a season. Get in, you win a game. I mean, that's just that. Anything 100%. After that, I mean, that's an incredible year. College, 100%. I've been asking all. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. College, I like college.
I've been asking all my guests this, and we had an interesting week this weekend with Colorado in position now to maybe make the Big 12 title game. Miami loses, so the Heisman is interesting. But what is the most complicated possible conundrum here for the college football committee?
Oh, wow. What I was asking on the thread yesterday was, that's interesting. That's your question. Let me think about that for a second. Because what I was asking is, okay, if I put you to it right now, who's the best team? Who do you think the best team in college football is? And then of the teams at the top, who do you believe is absolutely not one of the best? Like, who's the most fraudulent of the good ones? And then who's that soft middle, which I kind of conclude is Alabama and Georgia. We're talking about the teams at the top now that can beat you on any given day, but could also suck out the joint, especially Georgia, right? Good God. Like, sometimes you're like, are they any good at all? To answer your question, I think it's obviously any scenario that involves Alabama having a question, right? So obviously, if they lost the third game, let's just play that game. If they lost the third game, could the committee still figure out a way to put in Alabama? And even if it's a scrum of 2 loss teams, I mean, I think that's right now you have, I actually counted this yesterday. In the top 25, 23 of the top 25 teams are undefeated, have 1 loss, or have 2 losses. That's 23 teams still with 3 games left in college football. Now, obviously, that's going to shake out a little bit, but it's still 23 right now.
Right.
So the scrum of that I think it has to do to answer your question broadly, I think it has to do with the uncomfortable decision they'll have to make if an SEC team that clearly shouldn't get in gets in. That'll be the thing, right? That'll be where I think they have the most static.
Yeah, and it's a weird scenario where some of these SEC, like if you're one of these blue bloods, if you're one of, a Georgia or whatever, you're happy with the 2 losses not making the title game, because as long as I can get to the finish line with only 2 losses, I can't get my 3rd loss. And look, I'll stay out of the title game. I'm going to be fine with 2 losses. But if I got a 3rd in the title game and that situation's a mess, then it gets dicey. So, man, this is the first year of the 12-team playoff, and it just I feel like there's so many like unintended consequences, and just I think people aren't going to realize how messy this situation is.
I think you're right. And I think the biggest unintended thing was I don't think anybody really quite thought through, or maybe they did. I'm just not smart enough to have thought through that with the broader conferences. And so therefore these much more random schedules where you don't play everybody,
Wow.
you don't lose as many games, man. And so like that's why you have all these teams. Remember, the funniest thing of was this year? Remember when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois?
Oh, I know.
And everybody was not everybody, because you and I were pushing back on it. But I remember some people were like, oh, if they're a one-loss Notre Dame with a loss to Northern Illinois, there's no way they're getting in the top 12. I'm like, come on, dude. Of course they are, because it's Notre Dame.
Of course.
And here they are with 1 loss, still chilling. But it's the it's the Indianas of the world. It's the
SMU, if they had 2 losses and they're both like, hey,
SMU.
BYU and Miami both close
Yep.
games. I don't know.
And then if BYU, who keeps the Kansas City Chiefs of college football, right? If BYU loses 1 late, are they somehow like that's what I worry about. Like a team that loses when they lose,
Right.
but is still going to only have 1 loss, let's say, like a BYU. What are you going to do with that?
It's going to be exciting. I mean, I liked it better with 4, but man, from just a content perspective,
oh, it's so
the
great.
moving parts of having 12, I don't know that I want to go back to 4. I think this is going to be good. I don't need 14 teams, but the fact that it's 12, the betting implications, the content implications, it's just, it makes for a lot of fun debates, a lot of fun conversations. Last 2 quick ones. Any thoughts on the Heisman real quick?
It feels like it's more like it's Gabriel by default, or I think Jalen Hurts kind of played him. Jalen Milroe kind of played himself back in. And who am I forgetting? Obviously, and then right, and then kind of lurking there is Travis Hunter. By the way, the Colorado thing is hilarious. Kelly brought this up on a numbers game.
Yes, I completely agree with it.
He's right. Like we were obsessed with this team,
and they stunk.
And they stunk, and now they're 7-2.
They're really good. Nobody
barely
cares.
talk about them.
It's very
really
strange.
Weird.
I don't get it.
Really weird. What do you think that is, by the way?
I
have a theory.
Honestly, I don't know. I think the fact they lost the 2 pretty early. Who they lose? They lost to Nebraska.
They lost
to Kansas State. I don't know. I really don't know.
They got destroyed by Nebraska. And I will tell you that day, I stopped thinking about them at all.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this team is no good at all. They got destroyed. But then they quietly had that Hail Mary answered, right? And they just won games. So, I don't know. It's just they're one of 23 teams with 3 weeks left in the regular season with either 0, 1, or 2 losses. So, there's so much to snuff out. And who knows? The thing about it is the other way to ask it is there a scenario where the committee will not have any controversy whatsoever? And I think the answer is no way. There can't be.
Can't be clean.
No.
There's too many teams. There's too many candidates. It can't be clean. And yeah, you talk about the Chiefs. If someone told you now, hey, they wouldn't have lost till almost next Thanksgiving, you wouldn't believe them. How about if you told somebody when Baylor's up 7 with 5 seconds left and Colorado's throwing a Hail Mary, Colorado had, or maybe the Kansas State loss came after that. But if you had told somebody then, hey, this team is going to be in the driver's seat to be in the Big 12 title game and short shot to be the Big 12, nobody would believe that.
It's amazing, man. It's amazing. But a lot of this, again, I think this will only get more mayhemy as the years go, right? With transfer portal. So, I just think it's like, oh, you mean I can go here and still get paid? Sure.
Absolutely. I think the NIL has leveled the playing field where you just don't get these super teams like we saw with Burrow's LSU team or even some of those Bama teams. Last one. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I know a college basketball player who, is probably making financial decisions
Sure.
rather than prioritizing the chance at a national championship. I'm just saying.
You see what these kids are getting, man. These kids are
Yeah.
getting, or if you just believe the rumors or whatever. I mean, it's a lot of money. A lot of money for a teenager or 21. It's a lot of money for anybody. So,
Yes,
especially if you're not going to be
anybody.
an NBA guy, hey, if you can get your 6 figures, you take your 6 figures. And you know what?
And who can blame them? Who can
Can't blame
blame
them at
them?
all.
Yeah.
Last one. I was at the Baseball Hall of Fame this weekend. I spent a lot of time there. I could not find the Barry Bonds plaque. I did, however, come across a Barry Bonds helmet from when he hit his record-breaking home run. Does the fact that there's a helmet in there, does that satisfy you?
What do you think? What do you think?
Trying to get you riled up.
Would you like me? Am I allowed to say the comparison here on the show that I gave on text?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's the equivalent of like Wilt Chamberlain's ejaculate being in the NBA Hall of Fame, but not Wilt Chamberlain himself. Like, oh my God, 2000, look at this. But he can't be in here. Larry, come on. It's just so dumb.
Yeah, I would recommend to anybody, I talked about it in the open, I would recommend to anybody who likes baseball history to go, even if you're mad about Bonds not being in, and Clemens and Rose, and it is ridiculous that these guys aren't in. It's still enjoyable, but yeah, it is a little bit like, oh, there's Bonds' helmet, and there's a thing about Pete Rose, and, there's a little like, what is it? I guess a slide screen of just all the things that happened with him, but the fact that they're not in it is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, again, my whole
No,
argument is, we're the stewards of a living, breathing thing. It's arrogant for us to not allow future generations to even believe that these people were great. Put them in, put whatever you want in there, right? Rose bet on baseball, Bonds did this, that. The biggest thing, I'll just leave it at this. The reason that people like me who believe Bonds should be in there get so angry, and then people get angry back at us. What are you talking about? He cheated. Yeah, but you're arbitrarily applying it because you got Pudge in there and you got Bagwell in there. And I mean, really, they didn't use either. Like, you can't do that. You can't make those kind of subjective decisions and think you're in the moral right.
I knew Bagwell was in, but it's one of those things where it wasn't at the tip of my brain until I was looking at all the plaques of people and I go, oh my God, Bagwell's in, that's right. Oh my God, Ortiz is in, that's right. Where, come on, we know these guys did it. And these guys are lesser players that it's almost like you get a pass if you're not the A++ player, like the guys below it just fly under the radar a little bit.
But he had the audacity to break hallowed records. Yes. So that's why, yeah.
Absolutely.
And let's face it, it was an ass, right? He was a dick to the press. Yes. And so that's what does it in the end.
Yeah, Ortiz laughs and he's good with the media and he's got a smile and that matters. I mean, these things matter in life. Gilly, appreciate the time, man. Let everyone know where they can find you.
The VSiN numbers game, 10 to noon Eastern, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 Pacific, and the Beating the Book podcast starring Will Hill and Todd Wishnev, and rotating guests every week. We do that Thursday at Beating the Book feed.
A semi-resurgent Will Hill, trying to make up some ground in this a horrible start, trying to get there. Yeah, we are watching Lions Texans as we have an early turnover. So I'll let you enjoy the game, man. Appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, brother.
All right, that'll do it. Rate, review, subscribe. Be back Wednesday. Have plenty to talk about with all the NFL and all the college. Talk to you then. See you Wednesday.